Hey guys, James, I've got a very nice big project on this 97 Silverado Z71. It's got a 5.7 Vortec motor, and I got it for a great price because the head gaskets are blown, it was overheating, and he did not want to spend the time or money to fix it. I don't really want to spend the time to fix it, but for the price that I got it for, I figured it'd be a good video and a nice truck once it's done. So I will not bore you with a bunch of needless information. I'll try and stick to mostly what you're going to need to know, and some of the parts I'm going to probably speed through, but the more important things I'll slow down on, and for the things that may require more time, there'll be separate smaller videos, such as removing a power steering pump, probably more in detailed torque sequence on the heads, and maybe a few other things that I run into. I'm not sure yet, but we will run into that and deal with that whenever we get there. Alright, let's get started.
So this first video is going to be like mostly easy stuff. You do want to soak down your exhaust bolts, especially if they're really rusty. But yeah, it's going to be mostly easy stuff, getting things out of the way, air filter, belt, a lot of the connectors on the top side, they're going to be in the way, fan shroud. So yeah, this is probably the easiest part of this whole repair. So if it starts to look kind of difficult, then you might reconsider doing this on your own if that is what you're considering doing. Overall, the job isn't too difficult, but it is time consuming, and difficulty really depends on partly the tools that you have, your experience, and also in my case here, it's a four-wheel drive truck with a big ranch hand bumper on the front, so most of the time I was laying on the radiator and laying on just whatever I could lay on, and so leverage is hard to come by, and everything was cramping, and it was difficult doing this truck just because of it was it's got a small lift on it and big bumper, and you just can't, there's just no comfortable way to work on it. So just keep that in mind, that the two-wheel drive trucks aren't too bad, but it also depends on you and your experience and things like that. Other things you want to think about are how much time you can be without your truck. If this is your daily driver, you need to think about how long this is actually going to take you. The videos may show it, oh, I can get this done in 7 or 8 hours. It's probably not going to happen. You got to think about distractions at home, drinking beer, your time off of work, how tired you are. You also have to think about, once you get the heads off, to do this the right way, they need to be sent to a machine shop. They need to be checked, machined, cleaned, pressure tested, valve job, whatever, the whole nine is the best way to go. Just have them rebuild the heads, because if you're going through all this trouble to do this job, you really want it done the best it can be done. You don't want to pull these heads off again, so cheaping out or trying to save a little time, whatever, is not really the best way to go, because I certainly don't want to do this more than once and on the same car, and I'm sure you don't either. So just keep those things in mind whenever you're planning a job like this. Another thing you want to think about is your ability to put the thing back together. You start taking things apart and getting all hog wild and crazy, and everything's apart and pieces here and there, and all of a sudden the whole thing's on the floor. And then you send your parts to the machine shop, and you're looking at this thing and you're like, how in the hell am I going to put this back together? Perfect example, this guy called up to the shop a few weeks ago, and he had actually pulled the heads off of his car and sent the heads to the machine shop, had them machined, everything was all good. He apparently couldn't put it back together. He called us and was like, how much are you going to charge to put this thing back together? And ultimately we didn't take the job because it sounded kind of shady, for one. I mean, we could have taken the job. I definitely putting a lot of things back together that other people took apart, but you never know what you're going to run into is a thing, and especially on a job like this, is what did they break? What are all the parts there? Are you going to be missing 100 bolts? You know, what kind of organization did they have when they took it apart? Like, I mean, there's just a lot of unanswered things that you don't know when you're going into something like that. And you know, if and when shops take on jobs like that where people have taken stuff apart, usually they don't cut you a break on the price. Like, just because you know, did half the work, you took it apart, it doesn't mean they're going to charge you half price, because it's not gonna be quick and easy. You know, we got to sort through the mess of what, you know, probably obviously a novice, you know, started, and then now we got to finish it and, you know, figure out what's going on. And then of course there's the liability of, you know, any mistakes that the person that took it apart did. You know, we're obviously not going to want to warranty anything like that. All I'm saying is that if you do, you know, take on a project like this, you should make sure that you can finish it, because it will likely cost you more in the end if you can't. That's all I'm saying. So I actually bought this truck back in February or March or January, something like that. It's now almost November. So I bought it, did the repair. I think I finished it somewhere at the end of February or beginning of March. Anyway, just to stress the importance of taking the heads to the machine shop. Like I said, I bought this truck. It was overheating. It did run, but it wasn't drivable. It was just overheat too much. Like, it had a lot of little issues that I needed to address before I could really drive it. So I towed it home, pulled the heads off, and sent them to the machine shop. So anyways, one of the heads was actually cracked to the point of it would have never, you know, it would always overheated. Like, it wouldn't have held head gaskets. I mean, it just wasn't, the machine shop wasn't able to, you know, make it good. And the Vortec heads do crack quite often. The V6, the V8s, it's just a part of there's just not a lot of metal in between, you know, the places where they're, you know, should be, I guess. You know, the way the machine shop explained it to me is that they just crack. Like, it's just the way they're made. They're good heads, but you know, if you overheat them just a bit, they're just gonna crack. And sometimes you can get away with a crack depending on how big it is or where it's at, whatever. But in my case, I wasn't that lucky, so I had to buy I had to buy a used head, which was still rebuildable. So I had them both machined and you know, completely rebuilt, cleaned, new valve seals and all that good stuff. But anyways, my point is that, you know, if you're just doing head gaskets, you know, you can't always see cracks and you can't always see imperfections. Okay, this next part's going to be kind of hard to see. I'm going to point the camera where you need to go, but you're not going to be able to see me doing it, so I'll probably skip over that part, but at least I'll show you where it's at. So the nuts that we just took off here for the fuel lines, well, these are rigid lines and they don't move. Well, if we follow them back here, alright, so here are the fuel lines, and if you can see that nut right there, that's going to be the one we need to loosen. There's a bracket that holds the fuel lines, and if we loosen that nut, then we should be able to get enough flex on these fuel lines to get them loose. Alright, in addition to that bolt, there's also one right down there that we need to get to. We'll take that one out. Might be able to just loosen the bracket on the back and give us enough movement to get these fuel lines out of the way. So yeah, before I interrupted myself, I was just saying that you can't see it by eye always, and it just kind of seems silly to do this much work and then not take the heads to the machine shop. So anyway, this video is going to be wrapped up pretty soon. Just pulling off the bolts for the upper intake. In the next video, we'll be pulling distributor, lower intake, power steering pump bracket, power steering pump, EGR, and other random tidbits. I'm not exactly sure. The order in which you take on this isn't so important necessarily. You don't have to follow my order. I just went in and started pulling stuff apart. That's what I usually do. I mean, some things have to come off before other things, obviously, but you know, the main thing is get the easy stuff out of your way that that's going to get in the way of other things, and just kind of work your way down. Continue to work your way down until you get to where you need to go. If you do this before that, it doesn't really matter. You know, but in this job specifically, getting the wiring harness out of your way is a huge part of what this first video and even some of the second video, because it definitely is in the way of a lot of things that we need to do.
Shitload of ways to go. Just big ass motherfucking ratchet. God damn it.